Ever been so blinded by love that you didn't see the red flags until they were practically choking you? I thought I was helping my boyfriend get back on his feet. Turns out, he wasn't standing at all, and when I finally uncovered the truth about what he was really doing with my car, my phone, and my trust, well, let's just say he didn't see the ending coming. If you've ever been taken advantage of, or had someone mistake your kindness for weakness, hit that subscribe button. Like this video, so YouTube knows more people need to hear stories where justice isn't just served, it's plated with a side of poetic payback. Now let's go back 12 years, to when I was still saving the world, one moron at a time. The story begins 12 years ago. I was younger, lonelier, and convinced I had a savior complex. My friends used to joke that I didn't date men. I rehabilitated them. I even had a saying for it: saving the world, one moron at a time. And then along came Bob. Now, that's not his real name, but if I told you his real one, you'd probably Google him, and frankly, the internet doesn't need that stink in its search results. I met Bob while working one of my 2 jobs at the local mall. I was hustling, trying to make rent, keep my head above water, and Bob? He worked somewhere else in the mall. We bumped into each other during a lunch break, and before I knew it, we were dating. Within a few months, my lease was up. Bob suggested we move in together. At the time, that sounded romantic. Like, why not save on rent and see where this relationship could go? Looking back, yeah, that was mistake number 1. The warning signs didn't just appear. They flew in like a parade of flaming red banners. For one, Bob had unique opinions about the world. Harmless at first, but soon, downright bizarre. One night, over pizza, he announced, there are only 4 continents. The rest? Owned by the Martian government. Doesn't count. I laughed at first. Thought he was joking. But when I challenged him, asking if he was serious, he dug in. He'd argue in circles until you either gave up or nodded just to end the conversation. And then there were his life stories. I asked once where he'd been living before crashing at his mom's house. His answer? Camping in the woods. For months. With no gear. When I asked how, he puffed his chest, gestured to himself, and said, "This is all the gear I need." But his weirdest trait wasn't his alien conspiracy theories or his macho camping fantasy. It was his bone-deep, award-winning, Guinness record-breaking laziness. Bob was unemployed for about a third of our relationship. And not actively looking but struggling, unemployed. I mean, the man would sit in our apartment for days on end, watching Netflix or glued to some online war game on what he called his computer, except it was actually my spare. Dishes piled in the sink like a science experiment. Dust coated every surface.
And Bob?
Showered maybe once a week. The smell in that apartment could make a maggot gag. Meanwhile, I was running myself into the ground, double and triple shifts because someone had to pay the bills. Every time I'd ask how the job hunt was going, he'd hand me a fresh excuse. I don't have a car. How would I get there? The bus doesn't run in that area. The internet went down, so I couldn't apply. And like an idiot, no, like a partner who thought she was helping, I drive him around on my rare days off, getting applications, helping him fill them out, turning them in. Since he didn't have a phone, every application had my number listed. That meant Bob would hold my phone while I was at work so he could schedule interviews, or so he said. I could also call him from my store phone if needed. But here's where things started to get off. Bob began staying up later and later, chatting in his games group chat until almost dawn. Sometimes we'd spend the evening together. Then I'd go to bed and he'd say, "Just gonna check the game real quick." Hours later, no Bob. I got suspicious, but there was nothing concrete. No obvious smoking gun. I told myself I was being insecure. Then he started asking to borrow my car to see his best friend, Ben. Now, here's the thing, I actually liked Ben. Honestly, sometimes I felt like I got along with him better than with Bob. So, I let it slide. This happened a few times while I was on evening shifts. Bob would always return on time, my car fine, my phone back in my hands, and act grateful. Suspicious?
Yes.
But I had no proof. And then came the card tournament. Bob put on this big performance, how there was prize money, how with his deck, there was no way he could lose. He swore that if I just let him use my car and phone this one last time, he'd win enough to buy his own phone. It was my only day off, and I didn't want to sit at some card game convention I couldn't care less about. So I gave in. I bought a couple of green monsters, some vodka, and decided to have a little personal drunk party. Hours ticked by. No Bob. Eventually, I passed out. I woke up at dawn violently sick. This wasn't a hangover. I was on my bathroom floor, retching until there was nothing left but bile. I was sweating, shaking, my body in full revolt. No phone. No car. No Bob. Hours dragged by. My entire world had shrunk to the cold tile under my cheek, the sour taste in my mouth, and the sharp knot twisting my gut. I'd never felt that level of helplessness before. And still, no sign of Bob. At some point, I must have passed out from exhaustion, because the next thing I remember is clawing my way toward my bedroom. I wrapped myself in my bathrobe, each movement making my head spin like I was underwater. Getting down the apartment stairs felt like scaling a mountain. I was gripping the railings so tightly my knuckles went white. I needed a phone. I needed someone. I started knocking on my neighbors' doors. First door, no answer. Second, silence. By the third, a groggy-looking man opened, clearly wondering why a half-conscious woman in a bathrobe was on his doorstep. But bless him, when I asked if I could use his phone, he just nodded and stepped aside. I dialed my mom's number from muscle memory. She didn't even hesitate. I'll be there in 6 minutes. And she was. Mom took one look at me and didn't waste a second on questions. She got me into her car, and within minutes, we were pulling into the ER. The doctors ran tests, hooked me up to IVs, and eventually delivered the verdict. I had contracted an aggressive, antibiotic-resistant strain of C. diff. That's not the kind of stomach bug you just walk off. It's the kind that makes hospital staff switch into protocol mode, the kind they treat like a biohazard. And where was Bob during all of this? He waltzed in later that afternoon, phone and car keys in hand, wearing the most performative, concerned boyfriend face you could imagine. You know the type, wide eyes, hushed voice, like he's auditioning for the role of supportive partner in a bad TV drama. "Oh my God, babe, I'm so sorry," he kept saying, over and over. But my mom?
My mom saw through him instantly.
The way she looked at him, if looks could kill, Bob would have been a chalk outline before he even reached my bed. From that day forward, she hated him. I was out of the hospital and back to work within a few days, but the damage was done physically and emotionally. And somewhere in that haze of illness and exhaustion, a switch in me flipped. Because here's the thing, Bob's concern didn't match his actions. The man had my car and my phone the entire time I was sick. He could have checked in. He could have called my mom or even the neighbors. But no, he just showed up when it was convenient for him. I didn't know where he really was that night, but I knew it wasn't where he said he'd be. The cracks in our relationship, the ones I'd been painting over with loyalty and wishful thinking, were now canyon-wide. From that point on, I noticed everything. I noticed how he still wasn't making any effort to find a job. How he still forgot to do the dishes. How he'd still stay up until ungodly hours typing away on that group chat. I noticed how my gas tank was always lower after he borrowed my car. How certain receipts would appear in the glove compartment for places I'd never been. And every time I brought something up, he'd dismiss me, either with excuses or with that same circular logic he'd used for the for continence nonsense. But here's the part where my patience started morphing into something sharper. See, I'm not the kind of person who flips out without proof. If I was going to make a move, I needed to be absolutely certain. And after everything, the hospital, the lies, the months of me carrying him on my back, I wasn't just looking for the truth. I was looking for justice. That meant I had to get smart. Play the long game. Make sure when the hammer finally came down, it hit so hard that Bob wouldn't just feel it. He'd remember it. What he didn't know was that while he was wasting his days on that stupid war game, I was quietly planning my own campaign. The first step was observation. I stopped challenging him outright and started watching instead. Bob thought my silence meant I'd given up on pushing him to change. In reality, I was cataloging everything mentally at first and then in a little spiral-bound notebook I kept hidden in my work tote. Every time he borrowed my car, I wrote down the date, the time he left, and the exact mileage on the odometer. When he brought it back, I checked the mileage again. Then I'd quietly plug the distance into Google Maps and see where he could have gone. At first, it didn't tell me much. Just that he was putting way more miles on my car than it would take to get to his friend Ben's house. Then there were the receipts. Bob was careless. He'd leave them crumpled in the glove box or under the passenger seat. I found coffee shop receipts from places way across town. Gas station slips from neighborhoods he had no reason to be in. Once, I even found a restaurant bill for a table of 2 on a night he claimed he was hanging with the guys. I didn't confront him. Not yet. I wanted him comfortable. While Bob was busy waging pretend wars online, I started waging a quiet one of my own. I began asking little questions, not enough to spook him, just enough to plant seeds. "Oh, how's Ben? Haven't seen him in a while. Gas is expensive, huh? You must have been driving a lot. You ever see anyone from that card tournament again?" His answers were always quick, almost rehearsed. But the more I asked, the more his stories started to contradict themselves. I also started talking to Ben whenever I could. Nothing direct, just casual conversation. And it was in one of those chats that Ben, without realizing it, dropped a bomb. One afternoon, I mentioned how Bob seemed really into his gaming group lately. Ben looked confused. "Gaming group? He hasn't been online with us much in weeks." Weeks. That's when the hair on the back of my neck stood up. If he wasn't with Ben and he wasn't on the game, then where the hell was he going? The biggest challenge was the phone. Since Bob didn't have his own, every time he borrowed mine, I had no way to track calls or messages in real time. But I started doing something sneaky. Before handing it over, I'd check the call log and note the last dialed and received numbers. When I got the phone back, I'd check again. At first, the new numbers he called didn't mean anything to me. But one number kept showing up. No name attached. Always short calls, 2 or 3 minutes. I called it once from my work phone, blocking the number. A woman answered. Her voice was young, flirty. I didn't say a word. I just hung up. My gut twisted. Was Bob cheating? Or was he just spending my gas and time on some side hustle I didn't know about? Either way, it stank. The moment everything truly snapped for me came on a Tuesday night. I came home from an exhausting double shift to find the apartment looking like a disaster zone. Dishes were stacked high enough to qualify as a modern art installation. The trash was overflowing. And Bob was sitting at my computer in his underwear, typing away like the fate of the free world depended on his game chat. I stood there in the doorway, bag still on my shoulder, waiting for him to look up. He didn't. Finally, I said, "Bob, can you at least take the trash out?" He sighed, like I was inconveniencing him. In a bit, he said, eyes still on the screen. That was the moment. The precise second I knew that whatever love I thought I felt for this man had been buried under months of disrespect, neglect, and outright lies. I wasn't just going to kick him out. I was going to make sure he regretted every second he spent taking advantage of me. The plan came together faster than I expected. First, I stopped offering him my car. Any time he asked, I had a reason why I needed it. Grocery shopping, work, visiting my mom. I let him stew in that frustration. Then I started making comments about money, how I was behind on bills, how I might have to move to a smaller place. This served two purposes. It explained why I was suddenly less generous, and it put Bob on the defensive, making him think I was too busy worrying about myself to notice what he was up to. Meanwhile, I quietly moved my valuables, jewelry, important papers, my spare computer, into a locked storage unit my mom helped me rent. Bob didn't even notice they were gone. The final piece? Timing. I needed the perfect moment to pull the rug out from under him, when he was at his most dependent on me, with no backup plan, no escape. And I knew exactly how to make that happen. Bob's dependence on me was like clockwork. No car, no phone, no income, he was tethered to my life support system. All I had to do was pull the plug at the right moment. That moment came a few weeks later. I'd been watching the patterns. Bob liked to sleep in until at least 10 or 11 a.m. unless he was leaving early to see Ben or run errands with my car. So, I waited for a day when he had no reason to wake up early. The night before, I told him, "Hey, I have a super long shift tomorrow, so I'll be gone all day. You can use the car if you need to, just make sure you're back before I get home." He took the bait instantly. I could see it in his smug little smile. The next morning, I left for work, but I wasn't headed to my job. I was headed straight to my apartment's leasing office. When I'd first moved in, the lease was in my name only. Bob was never on it. That meant legally, I could have him removed without notice, as long as I had proof he wasn't paying rent, and I had months' worth of bank statements to show that I'd been covering 100% of it. The property manager didn't even blink. "You want him gone? We can have a lock change scheduled for this afternoon." I signed the paperwork, scheduled the locksmith for 3 p.m., and walked out feeling lighter than I had in months. Next, I called my mom. She was more than happy to help. We met at my place with boxes, garbage bags, and an unspoken agreement: no mercy. Everything Bob owned or claimed to own went into boxes.
Clothes.
Video games. That disgusting pillow he refused to replace. I didn't care if it was folded neatly or dumped in a heap. We worked fast, fueled by adrenaline and months of pent-up frustration. By noon, the apartment looked clean.
Fresh.
Like my space again. The boxes went straight into my mom's SUV. We drove them to Ben's house, because if Bob wanted to mooch off someone, it might as well be his best friend. Ben opened the door, confused. What's going on?" I smiled. "Bob's moving in with you. Didn't he tell you?" Ben stammered, clearly caught off guard. No." "Surprise," I said, and left the boxes on his porch. By the time the locksmith arrived, I was buzzing. The new keys felt like freedom in my hand. Every turn of the lock was like sealing the door on months of frustration, lies, and decay. Bob still had my phone number, of course, but that was about to change, too. At 4:15, my phone lit up.
Bob.
"Hey, I can't get in. Did you lock the top latch or something?" His tone was casual, like this was some minor inconvenience I'd fix immediately. "No," I said, voice calm. "You don't live here anymore." There was a pause. "What?" "I packed your stuff. It's at Ben's. The lease is in my name, Bob. You've contributed nothing. I'm done." "You can't just." "I can. And I did." The sputtering on the other end was glorious. "You're making a huge mistake," he said finally, his voice low and angry. "No," I replied. "The only mistake was letting you in to begin with." And then click. I blocked his number. From what I heard later, because small towns have big mouths, Bob tried to stay with Ben, but that didn't last more than a week. Apparently, freeloading is a lot less charming when you're not in a romantic relationship with the person you're mooching off of. After that, he couch surfed for a while. Last I heard, he moved 2 states over. I didn't care. By then, I had my peace. Walking into my apartment that night, clean, quiet, and mine, I felt like I'd reclaimed something bigger than just my living space. I'd reclaimed myself. I remember sitting on my couch that first night after Bob was gone. The hum of the fridge was the only sound. No clacking of keys from my spare computer. No smell of stale body odor wafting from the bedroom. No dirty dishes teetering in the sink like a hazard waiting to happen. Just peace. I cracked open a can of soda, put my feet up, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I had to do anything for someone else. I didn't have to wonder if my car would be back on time, or if I'd find mystery receipts in the glove compartment. I didn't have to ask where my phone had been or who had been calling. That night, I slept better than I had in over a year. The thing about revenge, real, satisfying revenge, is that it's not about shouting or screaming or even getting even in the same way they hurt you. It's about removing yourself from their control, cutting off the supply of your time, energy, and resources, and letting them face the consequences of their own behavior. Bob didn't just lose me. He lost the roof over his head, his access to my car, his lifeline to my phone, his free meals, his safety net. And the best part? I didn't have to sabotage him, scream at him, or even raise my voice. I just stopped being his safety net. And watching him flail in the vacuum left behind, that was justice. It's been years since all this happened, and if I'm being honest, I'm grateful for the experience. Not because Bob deserved me, he didn't, but because I learned a lesson I wish I'd understood sooner. Bob showed me he was lazy, that he was dishonest, that he'd rather take than give. But back then, I thought I could fix him. Turns out, fixing someone like that isn't your job. And it's not possible until they want to fix themselves. The moment I stopped trying to save Bob was the moment I saved myself. If you've ever been in a relationship where you felt more like a parent than a partner, where you were giving and giving while they took and took, you know how draining it is. But here's the truth. You are not a rehabilitation center for badly behaved adults. You are not an endless well of free labor and emotional support. When someone drains you without replenishing anything, you are allowed, no, obligated, to cut them off. Because once you do, the peace that fills that space, that's better than any, I'm sorry, they'll ever give you. So, what about you? Have you ever kicked someone out of your life and felt that sweet rush of freedom afterward? Tell me your story in the comments. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this tale of poetic justice, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Share this video with a friend who needs a reminder that they don't have to put up with dead weight. Because at the end of the day, the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about moving on and living better than they ever thought you could.